you think of electricity, you think of Edison. When you think of radio, you think of Marconi. But there is one electrical genius who is nearly forgotten. A man who dreamed of giving the world an unlimited supply of energy. His name was Nikola Tesla, and he was the master of lightning.
My services with Westinghouse being no longer essential, I resumed experimental work in a laboratory on Grand Street, where I began immediately the design of high-frequency machines.
Following the success of Niagara, Tesla was at the height of social acclaim. Everyone wanted to know more of this mysterious foreigner who was transforming the world with his electrical inventions.
So far as personal appearance goes, no one can look upon him without feeling his force. His cheekbones are high and prominent, the mark of the Slav. His eyes are blue, deeply set, and they burn like balls of fire. Franklin Chester, the Citizen.
Why was he so well known and so popular? It's because the technological advances that he made were so directly related to the relief of the drudgery that people had to endure in their work lives. They could see what he did helped them personally.
Every evening, Tesla showed up at Delmonico's, the most expensive restaurant in town, to be shown to his special table.
He is fanatical about his dress, usually sporting a fine waistcoat, white leather gloves, and a derby hat on his head. He is meticulous about his health and drinks a glass of whiskey a day, saying it will increase his life expectancy to 150 years of age.
Tesla hobnobbed with the leading politicians, millionaires, and celebrities of the era. This was the best way for independent inventors to find support for their projects. His friends were the New York elite, John Jacob Astor, William K. Vanderbilt, and the writer Mark Twain.
I have just seen the drawings and description of an electrical machine lately patented by Mr. Tesla, which will revolutionize the whole electric business of the world.
One of Tesla's closest friends was Robert Underwood Johnson, editor of the prestigious Century magazine. Johnson's wife was deeply in love with Tesla.
My dear Nicky, do leave aside the millionaires and Fifth Avenue for some simple pleasures. From one distinguished only by a great weakness, Katherine Johnson.
In fact, the world-famous inventor was also New York's most intriguing bachelor.
The fact that he never married, I think, had almost nothing to do with his interest in women. It appeared that he was always very interested and was attractive to women.
Many women sought his attention. The beautiful and wealthy socialite Flora Dodge, and even the famous French actress Sarah Bernhardt. But in spite of his charisma, Tesla was only interested in his inventions.
He had so many phobias that he couldn't have had close relationships with women. He didn't like most of the jewelry that they wore or the perfume, and he couldn't bear to touch hair. And and in fact, he didn't like to shake hands. And so these are all things that do tend to discourage intimate relationships.
The inventor even claimed that he destroyed his sexuality at the age of 40.
A certain French actress kept coming to me and made it impossible for me to concentrate. It's a pity, too, for sometimes I feel so lonely.
Throughout the 1890s, alongside his work on AC power technology, Tesla was also experimenting with high-frequency electricity. In 1873, James Clerk Maxwell in England had proven mathematically that light was electromagnetic radiation. Light was electricity, vibrating at an extremely high frequency. To explore this unknown world, Tesla invented a unique device, still known today as a Tesla coil.
The Tesla coil is an instrument that can step up voltages to high voltages at high frequencies. That essentially transmits a radio signal.
Tesla invited friends and potential investors to late-night demonstrations in his laboratory. In experiments, he would permit his guests to pass thousands of volts of electricity through their bodies to light a lamp or melt a wire in their hands. Mark Twain was always a willing subject.
Thunder is good. Thunder is impressive. But it is lightning that does the work.
Even today, it would be a little bit scary to go into Tesla's laboratory, and in those days when people didn't know anything about electricity, it must have been terrifying.
With high frequencies, Tesla developed some of the first neon and fluorescent illumination. He also took the first X-ray photographs. But these discoveries quickly paled one day in 1890 when a vacuum tube illuminated in his hand without any wire connection.
To me, it was the first evidence that I was transmitting energy through the air.
This was the beginning of Tesla's lifelong obsession, the wireless transmission of energy. In 1892, Tesla was invited to Europe to present the results of his high-frequency experiments. In London and Paris, he amazed scientists and engineers with lighting and electrical effects that looked more like magic than science. He also announced a remarkable new possibility.
I would say a few words on a thought which fills my mind and concerns the welfare of all. I mean the transmission of intelligence and even power without the use of wires. I am becoming more convinced daily of the practicality of this scheme.
The race for radio was about to begin. In 1888, the German physicist Heinrich Hertz had demonstrated that currents of high frequency emit electromagnetic waves, or radio waves, into space. But creating a practical means of wireless communication would require a quantum leap in imagination.
Hertz created the first radio transmitter and the first receiver. He had showed that you could create an electrical signal in one place and detect it in another place with nothing in between.
While in England, Tesla befriended Sir William Crookes, the discoverer of radiant matter. Crookes was a mystic and believed that human beings could communicate telepathically when they were attuned to high-frequency brainwaves. Tesla was skeptical, but one night in his bed he had a powerful and disturbing vision.
I saw a cloud carrying angelic figures, one of whom gradually assumed the features of my mother. In that instant, a certitude, which no words can express, came upon me that my mother had died. And that was true.
Tesla was convinced that he and his mother were tuned to the same frequency. His otherworldly experience would soon lead him to another revolutionary invention. On his return to New York in 1893, Tesla banished himself from social life and disappeared into his new laboratory on South Fifth Avenue. Following his uncanny intuition, he soon discovered that Tesla coils would transmit and receive powerful radio signals when they were tuned to resonate at the same frequency. Tuning is the key to all radio and television transmission.
In my laboratory, I could take in my hands a coil tuned to my body and collect 3/4 horsepower anywhere in the room without any tangible connection. Sometimes I would produce flames shooting out from my head and run a motor in my hands, or light 6 or 8 lamps.
By early 1895, Tesla was ready to transmit a signal 50 miles to West Point, New York. He could now produce 1 million volts with his new conical coil. But that year, on the Ides of March, disaster struck. Fire broke out in the building which housed Tesla's laboratory. Everything was lost.
Utterly disheartened and broken in spirit, Nikola Tesla, one of the world's greatest electricians, returned to his room in the Gerlach yesterday morning and took to his bed. He has not arisen since.
I was devastated. What could I say? The work of a lifetime lost in a fire that lasted only an hour or so.
The timing could not have been worse. In England, a young Italian experimenter named Guglielmo Marconi had been hard at work and created a device for wireless telegraphy. Concerned that Marconi would exploit his ideas, Tesla opened a new laboratory and rushed to complete his own system for wireless communication. This patent, filed by Tesla in September 1897, is the fundamental technology for radio. But it would be 50 years before Tesla got credit for his invention.
Various people in various different countries had the idea of exploiting this as a means of communication. But I think Tesla was the one with the real vision, in which you would broadcast signals on a definite carrier frequency, and then you would have a series of antennas that were sensitive to one frequency only, tuned to a certain frequency, and would detect just one of these signals and make an intelligible transmission. Once again, his vision describes the world that we live in.
I was so blue and discouraged in those days that I do not believe I could have borne up but for the regular treatments of electricity which I applied to myself. It puts into a tired body what it needs most, life force.
Following the destruction of his laboratory, Tesla developed a deeper interest in Eastern thought and spiritualism.
Mr. Tesla was charmed to hear about the Vedantic prana and Akash and the Kalpis, which he claims are the only theories modern science can entertain.
Inspired by the Hindu teacher Swami Vivekananda, Tesla began to look at the universe as a symphony of vibrations and waves.
We are whirling through endless space with an inconceivable speed. Everything is spinning. Everywhere there is energy. There must be some way of availing ourselves of this energy more completely.
In 1898, an unusual experiment took place in Tesla's laboratory. He attached a small mechanical oscillator to an iron pillar. Precisely timed pulses from the device made the entire building tremble.
Windows started crashing around the area, and he, being at the epicenter, didn't notice anything happening until some police came bursting into his laboratory. It was just at the moment where he'd picked up a sledgehammer and broken the oscillator. He just said to the policemen that how too bad that they had just missed an interesting experiment.
Tesla was, I would say, obsessed with frequency, the notion of resonance. The story where he takes the device and puts it on the girder in his office and, gets the frequency of the building, and supposedly, it's an apocryphal story, I'm sure, but it gets right at the core that, hey, if I've got the right frequency, I can move the world. And indeed, he talks about the frequency of the earth, and that if he can do that, he can, almost literally split the earth in half.
Meanwhile, Marconi was doing more practical things and succeeded in transmitting a signal 5 miles on the Salisbury Plain in England. Not to be outdone, Tesla decided to introduce an entirely new invention. In a specially constructed pool, potential backers were amazed to see the inventor controlling the motions of a small mechanical boat with no wires attached to it. This was the world's first radio-controlled device. The machine even seemed to think. Someone threw out the question, "What is the cube root of 64?" And 4 flashes came back. The audience was so surprised, Tesla had to remove the lid to prove no one was inside.
Tesla developed his radio-controlled boat in 1898 and patented it and thought it was an armament for war. He rationalized this as a means of ending war. The military who looked at it thought it was too complicated and vulnerable.
Soon after the demonstration, Mark Twain wrote from Austria.
Dear Mr. Tesla, have you the Austrian and English patents on that destructive terror which you have been inventing, and thus make war henceforth impossible? If so, won't you set a price on them and commission me to sell them? Sincerely yours, Mark Twain.
But I have no desire to be remembered as the inventor of a purely destructive device. I prefer to be remembered as the inventor who abolished war. That will be my highest pride.
In the summer of 1899, Tesla moved to Colorado Springs, Colorado, to conduct a series of secret experiments. He told curious local reporters that he intended to send a wireless message from Pikes Peak to Paris for the Paris Exposition of 1900. But his plans were even more ambitious.
I came to the conclusion that it would be ultimately possible, with very little elevation, to transmit electrical power through the upper atmosphere.
Just outside the city, he constructed an experimental station with sliding roof panels. A quote in Italian from Dante's Inferno hung by the entrance of the strange wooden structure. It read, "Abandon hope, all ye who enter here." During the construction phase, Tesla studied lightning.
Now, I can understand Tesla's fascination with it, because what happens in lightning is that electricity is being transmitted from one place to another. Electric power, not just electric signals, but real electric power is being transmitted from one place to another. And the way it happens is that the air itself breaks down, it ionizes, it becomes what we call a plasma, and therefore for a moment it's a conductor, and it's actually conducting electricity just the way an electric wire conducts electricity.
Inside the station, he began to assemble the largest Tesla coil ever built, which he called the magnifying transmitter. An antenna rose 145 feet above the building, crowned with a copper foil sphere. The entire station was, in effect, a machine to create lightning. Late one evening, Tesla put his transmitter to the test. He signaled to an assistant to close the switch. Huge streamers of electricity shot out of the coil and darted through the room. The sound of the exploding discharges was deafening. Outside, above the building, bursts of artificial lightning, more than 100 feet long, began to shoot out at the ball atop the antenna. Its thunder could be heard 20 miles away in the small mining town of Cripple Creek. Suddenly, the lightning stopped, and the entire city of Colorado Springs was plunged into darkness. The experiment had set fire to and destroyed the local power company's generator. Residents were furious and began to fear this mysterious stranger. Undaunted, Tesla continued his wireless power experiments for 6 more months. Late one night, an unusual event took place. Tesla noticed a repeating signal being received by his apparatus. To his own amazement, he believed it was an extraterrestrial communication. In a letter to the American Red Cross, he wrote,
"Brothers, we have a message from another world. It reads, 1, 2, 3.
The press had a field day.
If the mystical 1, 2, 3 was impulsed from Mars, as Tesla says, they certainly showed most excellent taste in choosing Colorado Springs. It is a rule in inventional science. When you're going to tell one, tell a good one. And men have become great in this way. Colorado Springs Gazette.
Though widely ridiculed for his claim, Tesla may have been the first to detect radio waves from space.
I believe that Tesla could have gotten these signals from space. We are getting them today, and these are the radio telescopes. That's what radio telescopes do today, receive signals from space. They are not from alien civilizations, but they are from the sun and from the stars.
On January 7th, 1900, Tesla boarded a train back to New York City. Perhaps he had mastered the power of lightning, or at least that's what he believed.
The law which I discovered in Colorado is wonderful, and it means that results undreamed of before will be possible as soon as a large plant is constructed in accordance with my plan. See the excitement coming.
When Tesla arrived home, it was a brand new century. Electricity was fueling the tremendous growth of the city. And now, there was talk in the air about the new art of wireless communication. Marconi arrived in New York in 1900 to attract investors for his new company, Marconi America. He filed a U.S. patent for a system of wireless telegraphy, but it was rejected because it was similar to Tesla's invention.
It became obvious, I think, to Marconi as well as to other experimenters of the time that the Tesla system was an efficient, powerful resonator that would produce electromagnetic waves that you could work with.
Confident in the future, Tesla took up residence in the Waldorf Astoria Hotel and wrote a sensational article for Century magazine.
First, let us ask, what is the spring that drives all? All this energy emanates from one single center, one single source, the sun.
In this detailed futuristic vision, he described a means of tapping the sun's energy with an antenna. He suggested that it would be possible to control the weather with electrical energy. He predicted that wars would soon be eliminated by machines. And to unite all nations, he proposed a global system of wireless communications.
When wireless is fully applied, the Earth will be converted into a huge brain. capable of response in every one of its parts.
It tells us about a vision he had for both power and communications, that he wasn't going to think small. He was going to think globally on this. And that's all very nice if it works.
The idea of a global communications network was very appealing to one of the world's most powerful men, J. Pierpont Morgan. He agreed to invest $150,000 into Tesla's worldwide radio broadcast center. But the inventor's real plan was to transmit without wires industrial levels of electrical power. Tesla chose to keep this a secret from his investor. In the summer of 1900, Tesla moved to Shoreham, Long Island, and began construction of a huge tower and plant called Wardenclyffe. This Tower of Dreams was made entirely of large wood beams and rose 187 feet above the ground. The plant next to the tower was designed by the architect Stanford White and was constructed under strict secrecy.
He certainly could have sent signals across the Atlantic with no trouble with a station of that magnitude. But he was still pursuing wireless power transmission. The tower would light up at night, shooting sparks, making noises. Such experiments, they alarmed the whole area.
Then, on December 8, 1901, Marconi took another step forward and transmitted his famous letter S across the Atlantic. Tesla dismissed the Italian's advances.
Marconi is a good fellow. Let him continue. He is using 17 of my patents.
The simple fact about Marconi is that he used Tesla's system to transmit signals and claimed that these were ideas that he had developed himself.
Morgan began to doubt the wisdom of his investment. Marconi's system not only worked, it was also inexpensive. And technical problems were beginning to catch up with Tesla.
He went back to Morgan again, asked for more money. Morgan says, "Where's the radio transmissions across the Atlantic? How's that coming along?" Well, it wasn't coming along.
Tesla was forced to tell Morgan his real plan.
What I contemplate and what I can certainly accomplish, Mr. Morgan, is not a simple transmission of messages, but rather the worldwide transmission of electrical power. A single plant of but 100 horsepower can operate hundreds of millions of instruments.
But Morgan was a practical businessman and had already decided to back Marconi.
I have received your letter, and in reply would say that I should not feel disposed at present to make any further advances. J. Pierpont Morgan.
Word spread rapidly that the investor had pulled out of Wardenclyffe, and Tesla was financially ruined. Late one night in 1903, the residents of Shoreham were astonished to see bright light emanating from the tower and an effect in the air like the aurora borealis. But in fact, Tesla could not transmit wireless power.
And his major defect was he was dreaming, but he was doing very few calculations on paper. Because on paper he could have realized that you can transmit power, but not very much power. You can transmit power to hear the radio or for television or for a telephone. But once you want to start turning lights in which you really need high currents, the power gets diluted because space is very large.
To his dying day, Tesla believed it could be done.
It is not a dream. It is a simple feat of scientific electrical engineering, only expensive. Blind, faint-hearted, doubting world.